A city that vanished without ever actually disappearing, not buried beneath soil, not swallowed by the sea, hidden inside a labyrinth of red cliffs where entire temples and tombs had been cut directly into the mountains. A wealthy capital of gardens, fountains and reservoirs carved into one of the harshest deserts on earth. Then the trade disappeared. The people left, and the desert closed around it. By the early 19th century, Europe knew Petra mainly through fragments of ancient writing and travelers' stories. Some doubted it could still be found. But in 1812, one man entered the mountains of southern Jordan under a false identity. What he saw beyond the narrow gorge would restore Petra to the world. And more than 2 centuries later, archaeologists still do not know how much of the city remains hidden. The man was Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, a Swiss explorer working for the African Association, mapping regions still unknown to Europeans. He understood that a foreign traveller asking questions in Ottoman-controlled Arabia would attract suspicion, so he prepared carefully. He studied Arabic, learned local customs, and travelled under the name Sheikh Ibrahim ibn Abdullah, disguised as an Arab merchant and scholar. While moving through the region in August 1812, he heard stories of ancient ruins near Jabal Harun, a mountain traditionally tied to the tomb of Aaron. He could not simply announce he was searching for a lost city, so he claimed he wished to sacrifice a goat at the tomb. A local guide led him into the mountains. The path narrowed, the cliffs rose, and Burckhardt entered the Essikey, a winding gorge that forms Petra's eastern approach. Then, through a thin opening in the rock, Burckhardt saw the facade now known as Khazneh, the Treasury. It was not a palace filled with gold, as later legends suggested. It was most likely a monumental tomb. But Burckhardt had little time to study it. If his guide sensed archaeology was the real purpose, the disguise would collapse. So he observed quietly, recorded what he could, and moved on. His account introduced Petra once again to European scholarship. Yet calling Burckhardt the man who discovered Petra hides an important truth. Petra had never been lost to everyone. Local Bedouin communities knew the site, lived around it, and preserved stories connected to its ruins. What happened in 1812 was not discovery. It was Petra's reappearance in the Western imagination, and the civilization behind it was far more sophisticated than early visitors understood. They were the Nabataeans. Their origins remain partly debated, but by the 4th century before the Common Era, they had established themselves across northern Arabia and southern Jordan. To outsiders, they may have looked like desert nomads. That impression was dangerously incomplete. The Nabataeans understood the desert better than the empires around them, its wells, its hidden routes, its seasonal rains, and the distances caravans could travel before men and animals began to die. This knowledge gave them control over one of the ancient world's most profitable networks. Frankincense, myrrh, and spices from India moved north through routes linking Arabia, Egypt, Syria, and the Mediterranean. Petra stood near the center of this exchange. Caravans needed protection, water, storage, and safe passage, and the Nabataeans provided all of it, taxing trade and converting geography into wealth. At its height, Petra was the capital of a kingdom, a living city of temples, markets, houses, workshops, tombs, and agricultural terraces. Its architecture absorbed influences from everywhere: Assyrian forms, Egyptian details, Hellenistic columns carved into Arabian sandstone, and later, Roman elements. Petra looked international because it was, but its greatest achievement was not the treasury. It was water. So how do you build a capital city in a place where water can disappear for a year and return as a flood that kills everyone in its path? Rainfall here is scarce and unpredictable, but when it arrives, it can rush through narrow valleys as a violent flash flood. The same water that could sustain a city could also destroy it. The Nabataeans designed a system to control both problems. They built dams to divert floodwater, cut channels along cliffs and through the sea, and constructed aqueducts, settling basins, reservoirs, and hundreds of cisterns. Some were carved directly into the rock. Others were sealed with waterproof plaster. Seasonal rain was captured before it vanished into the desert, sediment filtered out, and supply protected through dry periods with water channeled in from outside springs. The network did more than keep people alive. It supported terraced agriculture, baths, fountains, and possibly ornamental gardens. In effect, Petra's engineers created abundance where nature offered almost none. The Sick itself was made safe by this same engineering. A diversion dam and tunnel redirected floodwater that could otherwise tear through the gorge. The Nabataeans did not merely survive the desert, they redesigned it. This is why the city's decline cannot be explained by one dramatic disaster. There was no single night when Petra vanished. Its fall was slow, and it happened in stages. In 106 of the Common Era, Rome annexed the Nabataean kingdom. Petra kept functioning, new buildings, improved roads, but its independence was gone. Trade shifted next as maritime traffic through the Red Sea let goods bypass the caravan routes that had once made Petra essential. Then, in 363 of the Common Era, a major earthquake struck, damaging the city and, critically, its water system. For a settlement this dependent on channels, dams, and reservoirs, that kind of damage does not just break buildings. It breaks the reason the city could exist here at all. Later earthquakes compounded the damage. Still, Petra did not die immediately. Christian communities lived there through the Byzantine period, churches, mosaics, homes. By the early Islamic period, it had shrunk to a much smaller settlement, and after Crusader-era fortifications appeared nearby, it faded from European accounts almost entirely. But its monuments remained, and those monuments created myths. The most famous myth is the name Treasury itself. For generations, people believed gold was hidden inside a stone urn high above the entrance, still bears scars from gunfire, fired by those convinced it held riches. It did not. It was almost certainly a royal burial, though whose remains uncertain. Hundreds of facades survive, but inscriptions, burials, and records are often missing. Tombs reused, looted, eroded, or altered by later occupation, leaving monuments whose exact stories remain unknown. And what lies behind the facades can be surprisingly plain. Grand entrances often lead to simple chambers cut into the rock. The spectacle was built for the living outside as much as the dead within. But underground, Petra may still contain structures that have never been properly examined. Geophysical surveys have detected unknown features beneath parts of the city, including structures tied to water management. And in 2024, archaeologists near the Treasury excavated a previously unknown tomb chamber containing human remains and grave goods. It mattered not because it proved old treasure legends, but because it showed that even beside Petra's most photographed monument, sealed spaces can still go unnoticed. Satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, drones, and non-invasive surveys can now reveal walls, roads, terraces, and buried chambers without digging at all. That matters because digging is destructive and irreversible. Every object, surface, and fragment has to be recorded before archaeologists go any deeper. Petra's scale makes that process slow. The protected landscape extends far beyond the Treasury and the main tourist path. mountains, tomb fields, temples, caravan stations, and settlements like little Petra. Much of it has only been surveyed, not excavated. You will often hear that only 15% of Petra has been excavated. It is a widely repeated number and a hard one to verify, since it depends entirely on what counts as Petra and what counts as excavated. What is clear, without needing an exact percentage, only a fraction of this landscape has been investigated in real depth. And even the monuments we already know keep producing new evidence. Today, Petra faces a different kind of threat. Wind and rain erode the sandstone, flash floods still move through the valleys. Tourism presses on narrow routes and fragile monuments. Conservation teams have to protect the ruins without freezing them into something artificial or erasing the communities still connected to this place. Petra is not a dead city preserved behind glass. It is a landscape shaped by ancient engineers, traders, rulers, Bedouin memory, modern archaeology, and now millions of visitors. Its fame rests on what can be seen. Its power comes from what cannot. Behind the carved facades, unanswered identities. Below the paths, walls not yet uncovered. Beyond the main valley, roots, reservoirs, farms and tombs still waiting to be understood. The Nabataeans built a capital by mastering stone, water, and distance. Then history dismantled the network that sustained it. Petra was not destroyed in a single catastrophe. It slowly became unnecessary to the world that had built it. We enter through the same narrow gorge. We see the same red cliffs. And for a moment the Treasury looks exactly as it did to Burckhardt in 1812, but what we are looking at may only be the surface, a city not lost, only waiting